Hello everyone and welcome to Community Forum. I'm Mary Maguire from AAA Northeast, sitting in today for my friend Roy Cohen, and I am delighted to be here with all of you. And I'm delighted to be here with my special guest today. We've got a great show for you because I am here with my friend and AAA colleague, John Paul, who is our Senior Traffic Safety Manager at AAA Northeast. And he is also, if you listen to the radio or if you have questions about cars, he is our car doctor, our AAA car doctor. And many of you may know him better as the car doctor, in fact, because he really has a following. So we are going to talk about all things automotive today. We're going to talk about the Takata airbags. We're going to talk about Volkswagen. We're going to talk about winterizing your car. Even though we've had an incredibly warm start to November, we need to be thinking about that, John, right?
Absolutely, and thanks, Mary, for having me. This will be fun today.
It's going to be great. Yeah. And you know, John and I, we actually sit next to each other in Providence, so we're used to chatting a lot. So this is just going to be an extension of that. But you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you is a little bit about yourself to start with. You grew up in Brockton, right?
Yeah, I grew up on the South Shore. I still live on the South Shore. I originally started off when I left school working as a mechanic at a couple of different garages. Ended up coming to work at AAA 30 years ago. And I ran our auto diagnostic center we used to have in Rockland for many years, the approved auto repair department. Ended up in the public affairs department. And about 20 some odd years ago, I took on this moniker as AAA's car doctor. And it was sort of happenstance that even that happened. It was kind of a funny story how that all came about. But for the past 30 years at AAA, I've been trying to help people with their car questions and car problems, and also do an awful lot with traffic safety issues and programs throughout our club area.
Yeah, you really do a terrific job. Now, let me ask you this. Did you always love cars? Like as a kid, did you always love cars? Were you always fascinated by them? When you got your first car, were you taking it apart and putting it back together?
Yes and no to that question, actually, because I have always been infatuated by cars, but unlike some people that truly love cars, I found out that I could actually make a living fixing cars. So it was more something that I could do that I enjoyed, that I could actually collect a paycheck and make a living do it. But do I remember things? I remember my second grade teacher had a Corvette. So there were certain things about cars that always sort of stuck in my memory. So yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think anybody who has been in this business, whether it's an automotive journalist or a mechanic, we always joke that, you know, they have gasoline running through their veins, and that's what we do. And we appreciate not just cars, but things mechanical. So it may be how a machine operates, and that same type of mechanical operation might be similar to something that goes inside a car, but it's how the operation all happens. So when we see it work, and it could be something as crazy as an automated assembly line, and you see how the assembly line works and all the parts come together. People who have this natural mechanical ability, and I don't necessarily say that I have that all the time either, but we enjoy seeing how all the pieces fit together. So yeah, there's some things that we take apart and put back together just for the fun of it.
So let me ask you this. You are, as you said, a certified auto mechanic, correct? Did I get that right?
You're pretty close. You're pretty close. Way back in the 80s, there was a group called the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence. They decided to try to certify mechanics, technicians is what we usually refer to them now as. And I was one of the first people that started taking some of the certification tests when I worked as a technician. You took some tests and then you became a general service technician, certified technician. And then they had something called a master certified technician, which meant you took all the tests in these 8 categories. I still maintained that master automotive certification status. I was also one of about 700 people in the country that first took the advanced level diagnostic testing, which I passed that and have been taking those tests. And unlike some other certification processes, this is something you have to take every 5 years, and the information updates every 5 years, just like your car technology is different, the testing is different. So to continue to stay certified, you have to take these tests. And now the testing has expanded more. I think there's 35 or 40 different certification levels, everything from somebody who sells auto parts to light service, to diesel technicians, heavy-duty truck technicians, and different levels of alternative fuels. One of the other certifications I have is for alternative fuels. And those are things that I still try to keep, still try to maintain that certification and still try to stay up on it whenever I can, because a lot of what I do at AAA is answering people's car questions. And although I don't work in a shop anymore and I'm not around cars, I have to be able to research this information. So at AAA, our monthly publication comes out, and I write a Q&A column in there, as well as new car reviews every month. But I also write Q&A columns for the Boston Globe on Saturdays, the Providence Journal, a separate one on Saturday. On the South Shore, the Quincy Sun puts a column in, and there's several smaller newspapers that carry my column, as well as other AAA publications across the country that sort of syndicate my column as well.
As I said, John does have a following, and in fact, I've taken quite a few calls for John in Providence in our public affairs department, and people will actually call when they're on their way to the car dealership to buy a car, new or used, and they need to talk to John right away, and they've waited until the last 45 minutes before they're going to buy a car. Yeah. But that's really what happens.
Yeah, and it's interesting that people ask me a lot of times, what's the best car to buy, or what should I buy? And really what it comes down to, there's really no bad cars anymore. There's some that are designed better than others, and as much as I try to offer advice, buy what you like. You know, buy the car you want. Too often that I can say that something's good, or a neighbor can say that something's good, and when you finally get it, it's just not the car for you. So you have to think about, you know, what you're going to have. People literally fall in love with their cars, which is something that, you know, some people like. You think of a car as an appliance. All it does is get you around. It doesn't really have a soul, but people name their cars. Nobody names their washing machine, nobody names their refrigerator, but people name their cars. And it's something that they spend a lot of time in. They wash them, they take care of them, and they become very attached to their cars. And it's not unusual when someone sells a car that they shed a tear as they see the car go away, because it has become an emotional attachment. So I try to tell people, I'll try to help you with as much advice as you want, but still it comes down to what you really want, and it's a car you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, my last car was Betsy, actually, my Honda Pilot. You know, I've loved my Honda Pilots, fantastic cars. And fortunately, Betsy was inherited by my daughter, so I didn't have to say goodbye to her. But you're absolutely right, your car becomes your second home, especially if you drive a lot, as the two of us do. So I think you really hit the mark there in terms of the attachment that people have to their cars. So let me ask you this. Cars have gotten so incredibly complicated. Everything is computerized. There are a ton of computers in every car now in the new cars. Was there a time, though, when you could do all of your own repair work on your cars? Because I know you've driven a lot of different kinds of cars in your career.
There certainly was. I mean, if you look way back in the turn of the last century, and you looked at the owner's manual for a Model T Ford, it would say things like, if you're planning a trip of more than 10 miles, it listed a variety of things you should bring with you, including things like baling wire and a burlap sack, and I don't know what you were supposed to do with that, but just different things you're supposed to bring with basic hand tools and so forth. And then, you know, throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, cars were relatively simple, although even then people thought of them as things changed, fuel injection came in, electronic ignition came in, disc brakes became popular, and that seemed difficult at the time. Those systems are relatively simple as compared to cars today. Today, the typical car generates hundreds of thousands of lines of computed data every single second. The computer systems in cars, they could be 8, 10, 15 different computer systems running through controller bus network, just like a big business would. People say there's more computer technology in the modern car than there was in the space shuttle or a 747. There is a lot of information that's being processed inside a car. Can you still do basic preventative maintenance? Can you still do an oil change? Sure you can. Can you still check all of the vital fluids in the car? Absolutely, and that's something you should do. Can you do brake work on a car? If you could do it on a 1965 Chevy, chances are you can do it on a modern car today. There are some things you need to be aware of with electronic systems that you don't disable something by mistake. But there's still a big do-it-yourselfer community. But it's interesting that the radio show that I do and the questions I answer, I don't really tell people how to fix their cars so much. I like to think of what I do as a second opinion. So their garage said to them, well, you have a 2007 Jeep and it's going to need a new set of struts and it's going to be $1,000 and you need to do that right away. What do you think? And in that case, it's sort of, well, I'll look up the price, I'll look up the labor. Well, that $1,000 sounds a little bit high. Well, the parts are going to be a few $100s, the labor is going to be a few $100s. How did the garage come up with a $1,000 repair? And this just happened the other day. And I said, well, go back to your garage and ask them to really itemize what that repair bill is going to be, so you know that you're not, A, being taken advantage of, or you're not buying something you don't need. Because in that particular case, I couldn't find a way to come up with $1,000 worth of repairs on the car. So what I try to do is I try to give people a second opinion. I want to be that, that uncle you call up that says, that you say, hey, what about this or what about that? I want to be that person. I want to be that trusted advisor. And that's what we are at AAA. That's what we try to do with every line of business we have, is to be the trusted advisor for our members.
Absolutely, and I think, for most of us, a car is the second largest expenditure that we're going to have in the course of our lives, our home being the first and the car being the second. So, and if you're like me and you've got kids and they've got cars and you're paying insurance and you're paying, gas, and of course they're contributing too, but, it becomes a really big expenditure. So I think the advice that you offer is really invaluable to people. And speaking of offering advice, let's talk about the Car Doctor radio show for a minute. Every Saturday, right? Tell us about the show.
Every Saturday, it's on WROL Radio, which airs on 9:50 a.m. It is, or WROLradio.com is the website address. You can listen live, so around the world essentially. And it starts at 8:30, runs till about 10. It's question and answers. It's people calling in. We have a fair amount of interviews that we do on the program. Everything from, I had, in the last week or so, I had a CEO of a company, a new car company or car sales company that is essentially all internet based, but it's somebody who is buying and selling cars over the internet. They will buy your car, you take a few pictures of it, they'll give you a price, and they'll come and pick your car up and send you a check, and they'll sell you a car the same way. So they have this huge virtual showroom as well as a brick and mortar building out of Austin, Texas. And it's the company was founded by the CEO of a company in the UK called mysupermarket.com. And he wants to take that same way that people buy shoes at Zappos on the internet. They want to be able to buy cars that way. So interesting guy. Coming up, I have a guy by the name of Marty Shore, who is a former PR guy for one of the big car companies, who has written several books, and he just did a new book about Ford performance. And it's pretty interesting because it highlights a lot of Bob Tasca in the book, and Tasca Ford, kind of a legendary name in the 60s for high performance Ford vehicles, and a lot of it's highlighted in there as well as some rather novel things. One of the AC/DC members is highlighted because he's a big car guy, so Brian Johnson. So there's a lot of interesting things in the book. So I try to mix it up with some interviews, but also I always try to remember that it's a caller-based program too, and people can call in, and people can find older programs on, I have a podcast site, johnfpaul.podcast.podomatic.com, or you can go to iTunes and just search Car Doctor Radio, and you'll find me there somewhere. And there's 50 or 60 older shows that are always archived, so people want to listen to them. It's kind of interesting that for some reason I have a bigger podcast audience in the UK than I do in the United States.
We talked about this because I have some friends from the UK and they love podcasts. I have one English friend and she walks around the house cleaning and listening to her podcasts. And actually I've been on the podcast site and it's a great site. And so if you have an interest in tires or in brake problems in a particular, you go back to the podcast where John discussed this with a couple of really knowledgeable guests. And so the podcast site can be be really, really useful. Is there one most commonly asked question that you hear from listeners or from people who write in questions to your column all the time, sort of that keeps recurring?
Usually it has to do with maintenance questions in a repair shop or dealership which is recommending a high level of maintenance for a car that may or may not need it. And that's what we'll see sometimes. And it can be a relatively new car, a car that's a year old, and it goes in for its first service check, which might be at 10,000 miles, which might only be very simple things, a tire rotation and check the brakes and an oil change, and all of a sudden they leave with a $500 or $600 bill and they don't know why. And that's part of it, because sometimes, and not always, but sometimes when somebody goes into a repair shop, the repair shop formulates their own maintenance schedule. And although the maintenance schedule for your car is sort of the minimum maintenance you want to do, and certainly you can do more, it may be things that you don't need to spend the money on. So people will come in and they say, well, I just came back and they told me I need to change the power steering fluid and change the transmission fluid and change the engine coolant and change this and change that. And the car only has 30,000 miles on it and it's going to be really expensive. Do I need to do all this? And you look in the owner's manual, so sort of really the guidebook of how to maintain your car, and it says replace the cabin air filter, change the engine air filter, and do an oil change. And that should be $100. So you wonder, why is this extra maintenance being recommended? In some cases, it's being recommended strictly as a profit margin. Other times it's recommended because some people say, well, I know that vehicle better than the manufacturer does. Maybe, maybe not, but you have to be aware of those things. And so that's one of the kind of reoccurring themes that we hear all the time is, why is it so expensive to take care of my car? And some of it's technology. There's a lot of equipment involved to maintain a vehicle, and even a single technician working in a repair shop could easily accumulate $20,000 worth of tools on his own, not counting what the repair shop owns. So could be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tools necessary to make sure the car is maintained properly. But that isn't an excuse in my mind to do work that's not needed. So we hear that a lot, and then just regular things that go wrong with people's cars. Squeaky brakes, and my car doesn't start, and it hesitates, and it's got a dead battery, and why is the check engine light on? So a lot of those kind of things.
That's a popular one. Yeah. Well, I try to change my oil religiously, and I've done very well by that, I have to say, in recent years with my cars. Synthetic oil, is that I've just switched over. Is that a good idea?
Synthetic oil is a great idea. Synthetic oil, it has a little bit of a room for error in it. So if you're not that good about keeping up with oil change intervals, it makes up for it a little bit. Most new cars today have either come with synthetic oil or come with a blend of synthetic oil. And some oil change intervals are up over 10,000 miles now. And that is not an excuse not to check the oil in the car. Even a good running engine can burn a quart of oil in 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 miles. And if you're going 7,000 or 8,000 miles between oil changes and you don't open the hood in that time, by the time the oil gets changed, it might only be a quart of 2 instead of 5. And that's going to cause some really significant engine wear. So synthetic oil helps. Synthetic oil has some real benefits to minimizing wear in a car. I was never a big believer in synthetic oil because I always changed my oil every 3,000 miles, whether it seemed like it needed it or not, when I worked in a garage. And then I looked at the cost of synthetic oil, 3 times more expensive than conventional oil. And I was, why would I spend that sort of money? My car doesn't burn any oil, it runs great, why should I put it in? And someone sent me a case of oil. And they sent me a case of synthetic oil. So I did the right thing, I put it in my wife's car. And
tried it out there first.
Tried it out there first.
She's the guinea pig. Poor Joanne.
And I said to her, what did you notice? And she didn't notice anything different. But what I noticed was the engine in very cold weather cranked over quicker, it was a little bit quieter, and it was just generally a little bit smoother. And that was just because the oil lubricates faster in cold weather. And that's one of the real keys to synthetic oil. There's no real magic about it. In fact, synthetic oil isn't necessarily truly synthetic. It can be made out of mineral oil, but it's manufactured to a process where essentially all the molecules are the same size. So that's why it tends to flow better. And there's all different kinds of synthetic oil, whether you buy it at a big box store that has their store brand name on it, or you buy a brand name oil. They all meet certain specifications, but the most important thing is to get the right oil grade for your vehicle, right weight and grade, to make sure that you're not changing anything. Because today's engines are so complicated that if you put in the wrong weight and grade of oil, it can actually cause the engine to misfire and run poorly. So it's important to use the right kind of oil, the right weight oil, the right, there's a little starburst indicator that says what grade of oil it is. Make sure you're using the right oil for your car.
Okay, and so I find that in my owner's manual?
You'll find that in your owner's manual. If it's not in your owner's manual, it's indicated on the oil change cap where you add oil to the car. So you can look there and it'll say use 5W20 SH grade oil, and then you'll know the right oil for your car.
Okay, all right. Another thing I want to talk about just briefly, we talk a lot about gas prices at AAA and the fact that right now gasoline prices are incredibly low. We're probably headed into Thanksgiving at this point with the lowest gasoline prices we've seen in 5 or 6 years. We're almost fully $1 lower than we were at this time last year. So by the way, go out and kick up your heels and take advantage of the balmy temps we've seen recently and get out there and drive. But a lot of people think that they need mid-grade or premium gasoline and could actually save a lot of money if they buy regular. And most cars, if I'm not mistaken, operate just fine with regular. Is that correct?
If your car says use 87 octane regular unleaded, that's the gasoline you should use for your car. If your car says 91 octane recommended, what that means is that gasoline, 91 or 93, whatever the case is, will give you the most performance you can get from that particular engine. And performance translates into gas mileage. So the better the car performs, the better the fuel economy it will get. If your car says 91 octane only, then that's a car that you should use only premium fuel in. That's probably 15% of the cars that are on the road. So I got an email from someone just yesterday that said, I have a Lexus GS, it's a sporty Lexus, it's like a BMW, and they said, it says 91 octane, do I have to use that? Well, it's a sporty car. To get the best performance, you should use it. Will you ruin the engine if you don't? Probably not, because the engine's designed in such a way to make up for low octane fuel. But if you really want to take advantage of a car that you bought because it was a sporty car, spend the extra 20 cents per gallon and put in the premium fuel. Yeah, it really makes sense. But if you have a car like your Honda Pilot that takes 87 octane gas and you kind of say, oh, cold weather's coming, I better put premium in, it's not going to make any difference. It's just going to cost you more money.
Oh, good. So I can keep buying regular.
Keep buying regular. Buy it the cheapest place you can find it.
And by the way, one piece of good news for our viewers, we are very close to hitting the $2 mark for gasoline in Massachusetts. We're at about $2.06 this week, so we don't have far to go. We're sort of inching closer and closer to the $2 average for regular unleaded, which is great news, again, for people headed into the holidays.
It really is, and you know, over the past month or so, I have, in a couple of occasions, purchased gas for under $2 a gallon.
Yay!
So you can, if you shop around a little bit, you can save a little bit of money. So shopping around for gasoline makes sense, whether it's $3 a gallon or whether it's $2.25 a gallon. Shop around, you can save a little bit of money, take that money and use it for something else.
Absolutely, and you've got to know and shop the low end of the range, which this week I think was about $1.92 or something like that, and I've bought a couple of times at $1.98, which is a big thrill because we've seen some pretty high gasoline prices in recent years. So, you know, it's good news for us as we head into Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, et cetera. So let's talk, John, about some of the thorny problems that have emerged recently in the auto world. One is the Takata airbag situation. Can you talk about what the average consumer who has a Takata airbag installed in their car needs to know and should know to protect themselves and their passengers?
Well, first off, find out if your car's been recalled. That's the first thing. So go on the National Highway Traffic Safety website. You can actually put in your vehicle identification number now. They have a new, so that 17-digit number that's on your registration. It's in a little placard near the windshield at the bottom of the driver's side of the windshield. You can put in that number and it'll tell specifically whether your car is part of a recall. And you may find that your car has been recalled for several things that have never been completed. If it happens to have a Takata airbag in it, the potential is there, if it hasn't been recalled, that you could get hurt. And sort of the reason is one of the chemicals that they use causes the plastic part of the airbag to fracture. So if the airbag deploys, you could be hurt by essentially plastic shrapnel.
Yeah, shrapnel.
So, but, you know, that doesn't mean that you need to stop driving your car, because think about how often you've ever been in your car, your airbag's deployed. Probably never. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you get your car in for the recall. Honda actually just terminated their contract with Takata just over the past several days, and they said we're no longer going to buy airbags from Takata anymore, which is going to be a bit of a challenge, because I don't know who else is out there that can supply that, can meet that sort of demand. But it's one of those things that you think about. The most important thing is don't ignore it. About 70% of the recalls that come up never get handled. So people have lots of different things, and it can be for emissions reasons, and it can be for, there are sometimes recalls that I think are pretty minimal. It might be a sticker that didn't get applied to the spare tire that says, you know, don't drive more than 50 miles an hour on the Space Saver spare. Little things like that that, you know, I think they could just mail it to you in the mail and just say go stick it on it.
Does that concern you from a traffic safety perspective, that 70% of recalls are not responded to? I mean, should people be worried about that?
It really does, because most recalls last the life of the car. They're done for free, and your car's going to be generally better because of it. So why wouldn't you want to take a little bit of time out of your day and go get the recall done?
Absolutely.
Some vehicle manufacturers try to, when there's a big recall, like when Toyota had a big recall on potentially sticking gas pedals and all of that sort of stuff, floor mats that were moving.
Yeah, I remember that.
Most good dealerships extended their hours. They were open on Saturdays and Sundays for service, and they tried to make it as good of an event. You know, nobody likes knowing their car is going to be recalled, but make it as painless as possible.
Right.
Is what it comes down to. But if you do have a car and you find out that it has a recall because of the airbag, you know, don't drive around staring at the steering wheel, because then you're going to run into something. So, you know, just drive the car the way you normally would, and don't try to get into a crash. So, and just know that, you know, it's a huge recall. You may find that the parts are not always available. Even though you got the recall notice, the dealer may not have the parts in stock. So just be aware. And although it is a very catastrophic issue, it also is the amount of millions and millions of cars that have been recalled, the incident of injuries has been very, very low. It's potentially there, but it's very, very low.
That makes me feel better.
And it's in mostly warm weather states, so not so much here in the Northeast. So, and it has to do with the chemical that they were using inside the airbag. It's I think it was ammonium nitrate or something that caused the plastic fatigue.
So along the same lines, now that we know what to do about our Takata airbags and how to look for the VIN number, which I think is an important point as well, I had to go out and look in my windshield and check my Honda. What if we drive a Volkswagen? And as you know, most popular automaker, a lot of people out there driving them, about 500,000 cars, I think, impacted in the U.S.
Yes.
And the diesels.
Yeah, the diesels.
What should I know?
That at some point you're probably going to be less than happy once they fix your car.
With performance, in other words?
Well, Consumer Reports did an interesting test. And what they did is they took two Volkswagen diesels, I think one was a 2009 and one was a 2014, and they put them into essentially cheat mode. So they figured a way to be able to do it so it would simulate what it was like when the software was cheating the protocols.
Right.
One of the things that the cheating thing that came up was there was this particular pollutant called oxides of nitrogen. It essentially is responsible for ground level ozone, and so smog. It creates smog. And it's, in some cases, 10 to 40 times higher than it was tested at. Of course, the media, everybody said it's 40 times higher. Well, not 10 to 40, but 40 times higher. It puts the car in about the same category as a car from the 70s.
Oh,
so
dear.
it's not like it's totally spewing black smoke out of the tailpipe, but it's spewing we look at things, we look at carbon monoxide, we look at carbon dioxide, we look at hydrocarbons, we look at oxides of nitrogen. And this is the oxides of nitrogen part. And that's higher. Everything else is low, but that's higher than it should be. So when Consumer Reports put their cars into cheap mode, what they found out was that fuel economy came down about 10% and performance slowed down from 0 to 60 about 1 second. For the average person, when the car gets fixed, depending on how they're going to fix it, and the assumption is they're going to just fix it with software, it will be when your time that it takes to go from 0 to 60, instead of taking 8 seconds, will take 9 seconds. Most people aren't going to notice that. Most people don't drive a diesel with their foot to the floor trying to get to 60 miles an hour as fast as possible. They like the performance from their diesel because it feels very torquey and you step on the gas and it pushes you back in the seat, but it's still an economy car. The secondary issue is fuel economy. And what's interesting is when people bought late model Volkswagens, the fuel economy number was, I'm kind of making it up, but 44 miles per gallon on the highway and 30-something miles per gallon in the city. Well, what happened was when you went out and bought your new Volkswagen, you said, well, it says 44, but I'm getting almost 50 miles per gallon. This is phenomenal. But what happened was when Consumer Reports said the same thing. Our car got 49 miles per gallon, and now it's only getting 44 miles per gallon. It's getting about the mileage that it said it should get when you bought it. So even though it was in cheap mode, the fuel economy is about where it was if you looked at the window sticker. Well, you got the car home and it was better than you thought, but I think it's going to drop the mileage down to what the window sticker actually said. So even though the fuel economy is going to drop down, it's not going to be as good as it should be. It's not going to be as good as what it was, but it's going to be as good as what they said it was going to be, is the way I look at it. So, so I think people are going to be pretty okay with it. The real issue is what happens to the value of the car. If you went out and bought a 2013 Volkswagen Jetta, and it was powered by a gasoline engine, and you paid $20,000 for it, and you kept it for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, it'd be worth $14,000. If you went out and bought a diesel Jetta and you paid $22,000 for it, at the end of 3 years, it'd be worth $20,000. So because it's a diesel, it tends to retain its value a little bit more. Well, what's going to happen to the cars that people purchase with the idea that at the end of 3 or 4 or 5 years, it should have a higher trade-in value? And that's where it gets real tricky. I think the fuel economy part, people are going to be reasonably satisfied. The performance, unless you're somebody who measures performance with a stopwatch, you're not going to notice. But I think the trade-in value, if you're someone who trades your car every 3 years, your trade-in value may suffer. And I don't know how Volkswagen's going to fix that problem. The fuel economy issue, they might say, hey, look, we'll just give you a gas credit card for $500 and they'll more than pay for your potential loss of fuel economy. How they handle it's a little bit different. What Volkswagen did to their dealer network is they're guaranteeing that whatever the price of if you have a new or used Volkswagen on your lot, whatever the price was before this announcement was made, they'll guarantee that same price. So if a dealer had a car, a used Volkswagen on their lot that they were trying to sell for $22,000, and now a month and a half later it's only realistically worth $16,000, Volkswagen says we'll guarantee that the value of that car will be that amount, or we'll buy it back. So Volkswagen could potentially buy some of these cars back. The probably most interesting thing is whenever I talk to a Volkswagen diesel owner, the one thing they usually say to me is, I hope I don't have to get my car fixed. I really like it.
Right.
And there seems to be less people concerned about the environment than about the performance and the fuel economy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And Volkswagen still hasn't said how they're going to fix the problem yet.
Right.
They don't know if they're going to fix it with software. They don't know if they're going to add a different catalytic converter, which is the thing that cleans the air, and add a new exhaust fluid to it, which is what the new cars use now. They have the ability to do that. That can get pretty expensive. So who knows? Or do they just buy the cars back? No one really knows what's going to happen. It may be cheaper just in the long run just to buy all these cars back and send them to a country where they're not so concerned about the emissions levels, which was one of the other possibilities. So no one really knows right now. But if I owned a Volkswagen diesel and you were happy with it 2 months ago, I'd still continue to be happy with it and know that at some point they're going to do something. And it's whatever it is, no one really knows yet. So yeah.
So stay tuned and call John.
Stay
You have
tuned.
a question
Stay tuned.
or
Stay tuned and enjoy the performance of your car.
Right.
Enjoy the fuel economy of your car.
My first car was a Volkswagen Rabbit, and I loved it. 5-speed. It was fantastic.
No, they're Volkswagens generally make pretty good vehicles. Now this is the people that are probably suffering the most right now are the senior executive staff at Volkswagen that seem to be leaving pretty rapidly, and probably big stockholders that own a lot of Volkswagen stock that took a real tumble after all this happened. And it really came down to truly cheating. It's not like General Motors with the ignition switch recalls. That was a part that failed, and there was a new part replacement, and they kind of quietly did it. They probably should have been better about it, but it was a part that legitimately failed. In this particular case, Volkswagen blatantly lied. They blatantly cheated to try to get the emissions levels to pass. And people ask me all the time, why do you think they did that? I said, because I think it came down to the engineering staff at Volkswagen just couldn't fix the problem and get the performance they wanted. So they just, when it was all over at the end of the day, they said, oh, we fixed it. Well, we cheated, but let's hope we don't get caught. And they got caught.
Let's talk about the average car owner out there like me who needs to now think about, I hate to say it, the W word, winter, even though it's been incredibly warm recently, and the S word, snow. Both are on the way. We don't like to think about it here in the Boston area, but we know that last winter we had 9 feet of snow. I don't need to remind people about that. I think everybody remembers that pretty vividly. What should I be doing? What should our viewers be doing to get their car ready and in shape for winter? I know tires are a big one. I usually start with the tires.
Yeah, I can't really guarantee much, but I can guarantee it's going to snow. We may not get the hundreds of inches of snow we got last year, but it is going to snow.
Right.
And at AAA, one of the most common reasons we go out and rescue people is for dead batteries and flat tires. So first off, you want to make sure your battery's in good shape. The typical car battery in New England lasts about just a little under 5 years. So if you're driving a 5-year-old car and it has the original battery in it, it's probably getting to the point where that battery is going to fail. It's a good idea to test a battery in a car when it gets to be about 3 years old. And if you're a AAA member and you want to use one of your road service calls, you can actually call AAA up and say, can you send somebody out to test my battery? And then we'll come out with a machine that actually tests the battery.
I've had it done. It's a great service.
Charging system, tests the starter, and we'll give you a little printout, and it'll say what kind of condition your battery's in. And any good repair shop can do that too, and most will be happy to do it for you. So if your car's 3 years old, have the battery tested. If your car's 5 years old, consider replacing the battery in the car, because you're at that point where that battery could start to fail. And you don't want to have that happen. It's not going to happen today, and it's not going to happen on a 40-degree day, but on a very, very cold day, it takes more energy to crank an engine over, and on a cold day, batteries lose about 30% of their capacity. So you have a good battery that's lost 30% capacity, and it takes more energy to crank the engine over, so you're more likely to have a battery issue. We're fortunate in a way that here in the Northeast, batteries last 5 years or so. If you live in a hot weather state like Arizona or Central Florida, typical life of a battery because of the heat is only 2 or 3 years. So, they have the sunshine and the warm weather. We have snow, but our batteries last longer. So
there are some advantages
there
to
are
living
some advantages
in the land of blizzards. Okay, that's
Then
good.
when it comes down to tires can make a huge difference in how your car performs. And we like to say that a tire is considered worn out when it's down to 2 30-seconds of tread. So if you take a coin and you take a nickel, for instance, and you stick it in the tread and it doesn't come to who's ever on a nickel, Washington, doesn't come to the top of his head, your tire's worn out.
So a nickel is the best coin to use, okay? Because I hear quarter, I hear dime. Okay,
nickel's the best one.
All
to
right.
use.
Get yourself
And
some nickels.
look at the tread, and it should be even all the way across. And if it isn't, it's time to replace it. That being said, that's the bare minimum tread for your tire.
Okay.
It should be better than that. And there's been a lot of tests done that show a tire that's maybe has 10,000 miles on it and a tire that has 60,000 miles on it. And although both tires are perfectly legal and both tires are perfectly safe, in winter weather, the newer tire is going to perform much better. And by much better, that could be 100 feet difference in stopping distance.
Wow.
So on a snowy day with a little bit of packed down snow, that tire that's new could stop at 100 feet shorter than that tire that's still legal, but near its point of being worn out.
Difference between hitting another car and not hitting another car.
And 100 feet hitting many other cars.
Whatever
so
it is,
exactly. So having good tread on your tires is important. The other thing is, if you're somebody that needs to be out early before the snow plows,
like
the
us.
best thing you can do is
well, not that early.
is put 4 snow tires on your car. Snow tires will give you the maximum traction, not just to get moving, but also for control and stopping. And we have a coworker, and she lives at the top of a hill. And last year, she couldn't get home several days. She got to the bottom of her hill. She has a front-wheel drive car, had good tires on it, but she couldn't drive home. I said to her, go out and buy 4 winter tires for your car. And she got home every other snowstorm after that.
Was she getting a running start at the bottom? That's what I did.
She tried everything, including backing up the hill, and she
Wow.
still couldn't. She still couldn't get home. Put winter tires on her car. She got home.
Okay.
So winter tires. If you live on the top of a glacier, if you have to be out early, that's going to help.
So worth the money, huh? Because you always hear about all-weather tires, but
Yeah.
you're saying that the snow tires really make a difference.
All-season tires in good condition might give you about 50 or 60% of the traction of a good winter tire in up to 4 or 5 inches of snow. Well, many times last year we had 3 feet of snow. So, and you're only getting about half the traction. So the other thing is, all-season tires or all-weather tires, well, where are they all-season for? Are they all-season for the
Good
Northeast? Or are they all-season for Iowa? Or are they all-season for Georgia?
Very good point.
Big so difference. they have to make sort of a one-size-fits-all condition tire, and it may not be the condition that we're naturally in. So you have to look at your own driving habits in your own car. The other thing is, if you drive an all-wheel drive vehicle, like your Honda Pilot, a Subaru Forester, a pickup truck with all-wheel drive, something like that, you'll find that the traction capability is that much better. You'll get moving that better. But when it comes time to stopping, all cars stop about the same. So usually what happens the first snowstorm of the season, it's not unusual to see that 4-wheel drive vehicle zip by you out on the highway doing 60 miles an hour. And that's usually the first vehicle you see in the ditch.
That's right.
Because they're driving too fast. And even though the car can get moving that way, when it comes time to make that evasive maneuver, it comes time to step on the brakes, it behaves just like any other car. In fact, it may behave worse because depending on the vehicle, if it's taller, it has a higher center of gravity, and the technology might not be there the same way it would in a front-wheel drive car or even a rear-wheel drive car. So what we try to tell people is, don't get overconfident in your new SUV. And think of an SUV as it will get you up the hill, but it's the same toboggan coming down the hill as every other vehicle. So you're not going to have control. You're not going to be able to steer the way you should. And even though today's cars have anti-lock brakes and traction control and stability control and lane departure technology and all kinds of things that help keep the car safer, it still won't be. Common sense still has to take place.
You are so right. You know what, people? Winter's coming. Slow down. If it's snowing, if it's raining, slow down. I mean, that's really, it's a message that we send to people all the time at AAA. There's no substitute for curbing your speed when it's wet and slippery or snowy outside.
And it's one of those things that one of the things we always tell people, and we do these classes called driver improvement classes. So we try to tell people how they should try to improve their driving habits. And we always tell them to leave 3 seconds of following distance between their car and the car in front of them. So a car in front of you goes by a fixed object, it should take you about 3 seconds to go past that same object. A lot of people learned in driver's ed, leave 1 car length for every 10 miles an hour. Then you spend all your time counting car lengths and you don't know, nobody knows how long a car is. The average person can't tell the distance of this room, for instance, so how are they going to be able to tell what 90 feet is or 150 feet?
Yeah.
So you do it in seconds. So the car in front of you goes by a bridge, it should take you about 3 seconds to get to that same spot. In darkness, add an extra second. In inclement weather, rain, snow, add another second or 2. Leave as much room as you can. The other thing is, get your eyes up off the road right in front of you. Look way down the roadway so you can anticipate things that happen. It's not unusual that you hear about these multi-car pileups that happen. And if you could see it in slow motion, what you see is a set of taillights come on, and it would be boom, 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 and then everybody runs into each other. If you were looking well up ahead on the road, you could see the first set of taillights come on, you could adjust your speed, get out of the way, whatever the case is. So by focusing not just in front of you, but by focusing way up the roadway, 20 or 30 seconds ahead up on the roadway, you're going to be able to anticipate problems. You're going to see the car that spun out on a winter night, or even the rainstorm that's approaching. If you see one of these like flash rainstorms that happen, you can actually see it start to happen if you look down the road fast enough, and you can adjust your speed because of that. Or the truck that just changed lanes for no reason and caused traffic to get all crazy. You can anticipate that by looking down the roadway. So slow down, leave plenty of room, scan the roadway, and just be prepared for winter driving.
You know, scanning the roadway is so important, and it's something that I've really tried to teach my kids because, as you know, I have 3 young drivers. And whenever I come to an intersection, I try to scan the intersection, see if there's somebody running a red light, which there usually is. That happens a lot. The other day, I was at a big intersection on Route 1 North and South near where I work in Westwood. There was a wrong-way driver coming the wrong way, driving north on Route 1 South, who was in the middle of the intersection trying to make a U-turn to get back onto the other side.
Terrific.
In the middle. It was terrific. It
Yeah.
was a terrific scenario. And if I hadn't really scanned the intersection and seen that person ahead of time, I think I could have actually had a collision with this person because he or she was trying to make the U-turn at the same time I had the green arrow to turn onto University Avenue. So scanning an intersection really makes a lot of sense.
And you said something about the intersection and people running the red light. When the light turns from red to green, take a breath. Let that, whatever that car is, it's going to go through it. And even the right turn on red rule, right turn on red is stop, look and see if it's safe, and then you can turn right on red if it's safe.
I think most people have forgotten about that part.
Most people forgot the stop part, and they just try to zip through as the light turns red, which if you're in a state that happens to have red light cameras, you will get a ticket for that, by the way. But you want to look for those drivers. You want to look for the potential that that person is going to slide through that red light or try to squeeze all they can out of that yellow light. And if you immediately hit the gas when your light turns from red to green, chances are you're going to collide in the intersection. So scanning the roadway, looking back and forth is important. And most crashes happen left turns in intersections like that. So, and age plays a part. As we get older, our reaction times slow a little bit, our vision's not as good as it used to be, and those are one of the 5 more dangerous intersections where crashes can happen. And it's usually failure to yield, and it's something that we can all try to improve our driving habits by scanning. And there's some things that are just naturally occurring when we're born. We have very poor peripheral vision. As we get older, our peripheral vision gets a lot better, and then as we get older still, it starts to get narrower again. And there's some things you can try that can try to improve your peripheral vision so you can scan more and see more on the roadway.
I know you're an expert on older drivers, so I want to talk about that if we have time when we come back. But first, we're going to hear from Gary LaPierre, who has some information, public service announcements, and information about our sponsors. Stay with us.
Hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662. Or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilse Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Community Forum showtimes in Easton. Mondays at 9 p.m., Tuesday at 8 a.m., Wednesdays 3 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. And that too, Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 22. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
And finally, one more. Bingo returns. Hey, who's not happy about that? On Wednesday, December 2nd, from 6:45 to 9:45, the doors open at 5:30 p.m. for the early birds. A Haveth Torah congregation is the location. That's at 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. So hey, who doesn't love to play bingo and win some money? My husband's aunt used to win $700, $800 sometimes on her good bingo nights. So you never know, right?
You never know.
So I am back here with John Paul, and there you see the information on the screen that you can use to contact us, by the way. John gets emails and phone calls all day long. You see his email information there on the screen, as well as mine. We are always happy to answer your traffic safety questions, your questions about AAA. You may have questions about registry services that we now have in 10 of our 30 Massachusetts branches. We are on hand all day long from 8:30 to 5 to answer all of our questions, or all of your questions, from our AAA members. Or if you simply want to call John and ask him a question about your car, about what kind of gas you should be using, about what type of oil you should be using, about what you should do if you have a Takata airbag in your car, or if you drive a Volkswagen, any of those topics that we've covered today. And you know what? He can answer just about any question that you have, because as you can probably tell, he has seen it all and driven most of it too when it comes to cars on the roadway. So
I'm not great with relationships, though. So, if you have a relationship question, call somebody else.
That's not true. Married to the same woman, the lovely Joanne, who apparently should be getting a credit as the assistant car doctor, since she tests out all of your products before you do, according to what you said today.
Sometimes she does.
But at any rate, I want to close, we've got a couple of minutes here, by talking about the fact that we just saw the end of daylight saving time. I don't need to remind people of this. You know what it's like when you get out of work now at 5 o'clock. It's dark. Or pretty much dark. And a lot of people this week, John, have issues. They don't sleep well this week with the change of time. They have a hard time adjusting. They might suffer from seasonal affective disorder, where they feel a little bit depressed about the fact that it's getting dark earlier. But one of the things that we see in traffic safety is that we see an increase, sometimes as much as 10%, according to police, in the number of crashes because of the fact that it's getting darker earlier, less visibility, all of those things. What do people need to know about drowsy driving, which can be a real problem this week and throughout the year?
Well, you're absolutely right. When we turn the clocks back or forward, it really doesn't make any difference. It disrupts people's sleep cycles. And those sleep cycles can stay disrupted for several weeks, so people aren't getting enough sleep. And usually it's when you lose that hour of sleep is where some of the issues happen. Where we see it now, this time of year, people are driving in the dark, and frankly, people's vision isn't as good as it used to be when they were younger. You need 3 times as much light to see between the time you're 20 and the time you're 60, twice as much light to see for the 40-year-olds that are watching and say, I can see fine. They can't see as well as they could when they were 20. So you need more light to see, and that's why the crashes happen. If you've noticed, as you probably have on your ride home from work, the overall speed on the highways slowed down a little bit. People are driving a little bit slower because they're not as comfortable. They're not seeing as well as they should. So sort of the same basic rules apply to leave plenty of room. Make sure your headlights are working properly. One of the things that we have seen, though, is as cars start to age, their headlights are starting to age as well. And the plastic lens that covers the headlights on some cars can turn kind of an opaque color, and that actually limits the amount of light you're getting on the road. So you want to make sure that if those lenses are supposed to be crystal clear and they're not, you can bring it to a repair shop and they can polish those lenses and get them nice and clean so you can get as much light on the road as possible. The other thing is, if your headlights are just 5 or 6 years old, the headlight bulbs tend to age and they're just not as bright as they used to be. So replacing the headlights with even the same style will get more light on the road. And you can even consider getting a slightly brighter headlight to just put more light on the road. Always a good idea. Just about 1 out of 4 or 5 cars on the road today either have a headlight or a taillight out. So your own car is, of all the people in the room here today, there's probably one of us that has a taillight out or a headlight out somewhere. So now that the days are getting shorter, get out there, turn all the lights on in your car, make sure they're all working, make your car as visible as possible. It sounds a little corny, but see and be seen. So you want to make sure your lights are working properly so you can see. You also want to make sure they're working properly so people can see you.
The AAA Foundation has actually done a lot of research on drowsy driving, and in fact, the number is that across this country, every single day, more than 250,000 of us fall asleep at the wheel. And sometimes it's just for a nanosecond or a microsecond, but that's enough time sometimes to cover, as we always talk about, the length of a football field if you're traveling at 60 miles an hour. So drowsy driving is a real hazard out there. Really, what we talk about is that the only cure for driving tired is to sleep, is to pull over to a safe place, right, and take a nap, literally.
Absolutely, and there's, turning the air conditioning on, opening the windows, singing, turning the radio up real loud. None of those things will happen. You talk to professional truck drivers, and they'll tell you about driving while they're tired, and they'll say the only thing that helps is sleep. You can cheat a little bit. Through a combination of a quick nap, a 15 or 20-minute nap,
right.
And you don't want to sleep any longer than that because then you sort of start to fall into REM sleep and you wake up groggy. So start with a caffeine drink. If you're out on the road and you have a couple hours of driving to go, caffeine drink first, so cola, coffee. Try to get 15 or 20-minute nap, set an alarm to make sure you wake up. It takes about 20 minutes for the caffeine to get into your system, so that will give you a bit of a burst of energy. The nap will give you a bit of a burst of energy. Do a little exercise, take a little quick walk around the car, get some fresh air, get in your car. That will get you probably 2 or 3 hours of kind of renewed energy, and you'll be able to make it home safely. But if you find yourself, you're blinking, you're yawning, your head's falling forward, it's time to get off the road, because like you said, 250,000 people fall asleep every single day behind the wheel. In 1 second that you close your eyes, just that 1 second at 60 miles an hour, you've covered just about 90 feet. So you think about that, you blinked for 1 second, you covered 90 feet. That's an awful lot of distance not to be paying attention and not to have control over your vehicle. So you talk to people, you put 30 people in a room, and you find out that at least some of them have fallen asleep while they drive, so very dangerous.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen to you or me, but I know we're very careful. We do drive a lot. Hey, John, it has been so great having you on the show today. I have learned so much, actually, about what I need to do to winterize my car, what I need to do with my battery, what I need to do to stay awake on the roadway, and we could do a whole nother show on everything that you know about traffic safety and older drivers, I know, is one of your specialties, and we talked a little bit about that today too. So I'm so glad that we've had this chance to chat, and I'm so glad you've joined us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Once again, I am Mary Maguire. We thank John Paul, and we hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Community Forum. Have a great day.